So recently, Conservative Home did a day with Lee Anderson. Now, I really do not think much to Lee Anderson. I think he is an absolutely awful politician. He has no good policies I think he could put forward, and there is no way at all he would incredibly struggle to say that the Tory policies of a party that he is standing for have been better for his constituents than, let's say, a future Labour government's one would be. Again, I'm a member of the Labour Party. I am sort of very much in full support that we need to get the Tories out because, quite frankly, their record over the past 13 years at this point has been absolutely abysmal. They have no one else to blame but themselves for this. Everything they do has been lurching from one disaster to another. This whole Brexit mess that they're in currently still, even if Rishi Sunak gets this deal done, it will not sort of guarantee and solve the issues of getting Brexit done, as we've seen a lot of backbench, even Brexiteers, softening their stance, shall we say, in order to try and move on from Brexit because they're fed up of talking about it, because they know that Brexit has ultimately failed. But anyway, let's go on to today and have a day, or at least as Conservative Home spent a day with 30p Lee. This is interesting because he makes some comments, so to say. Yeah, fun times. So let's go. Let's go getting on into it. So, as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help support the channel. Like I say, there is the like and share button you can click. And of course, there is the subscription button if you're new to the channel. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page, the one donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. There is the Pony Club as well. And of course, the YouTube thank you button. So, let's go over then to Conservative Home with the day they spent with good old 30p Lee. We'll keep it there. So, a day with Lee Anderson. Has the party tried to muzzle you? He's been told, keep saying what you're saying. So, the Tory party, what a bloody shambles, one of Lee Anderson's constituents declares. We're in the new Cross pub in Sutton in Ashfield, where Anderson was conducting a Friday morning surgery. He said, the only person I've met who's done anything right is you. The man, a retired chemical engineer, went on. Again, what has Lee Anderson actually done? He hasn't done anything other than open his mouth. I want to reiterate just how bad a MP Lee Anderson actually is. And there's a lot of people saying that, oh no, Lee Anderson has been put out there as just a bit of red meat, just to try and get to a bit of attention attractor. Pay attention to what Lee's saying, not what we're saying. Absolutely not. There is a reason why Lee Anderson was made the deputy whip, and that is because there is a sense, or at least a hope, that Lee Anderson will be able to, at least potentially at the next general election and in the upcoming local elections, be able to try and steady and maybe hold on to some, not all, but some of these red wall seats. Because even in his own seat, as we'll get to in a bit, his own seat is not a guaranteed win. That's for sure. So, Anderson, a former coal miner and Labour councillor, who in 2019 captured for the Tories the seat of Ashfield on the western end of Nottinghamshire, has become a political celebrity, acclaimed on GB News as the Red Wall Rottweiler, and earlier this month was made the deputy chairman of the Conservative Party. But it was notable, spending a day with him, in which he met dozens of his constituents, how carefully he listened to them. Saying, if Rishi Sunak was here, what would you say to him? Anderson asked his constituent. He said, "I'd say to him, grow some balls," the man replied. "You've been expounding in a muddled way the government's ills and concluding you've got no hope of getting into power at the next election." And also replied in a very mild tone, "We will. There will always be in England. Blair had charisma. He had some sound policies. He had the minimum wage policy, which round here doubled people's wages overnight. He had heavyweights in his cabinet. I can't think of a single person in Starmer's shadow cabinet who anyone's ever heard of." Again, you could very easily say that about David Cameron's cabinet now, and you could even say now, if you went into the streets and you were to ask who's in Rishi Sunak's cabinet, you wouldn't get, I think, a lot of answers unless people are politically active or at least paying attention. And as I've said before, one of the biggest problems certainly in the UK is that people are not politically active. They don't pay attention at least to as much as politics as people really should, or or at least even as I would like, because quite frankly, we would not be in this situation where we are right now if people did. So, having already persuaded the man to join the Conservative Party, he now agreed with him that the quote, "the trans lobby are absolute nutters." Um, Again, I won't read the comment because I think that's quite transphobic. Next, a paramedic called Simon Parry, who is an evangelist for defibrillators, told Anderson that there were too few in Ashfield. By the end of his conversation, which included a very lucid account of how the heart works, Anderson had committed himself to getting a defibrillator installed outside every pub in Ashfield at the cost of over £12,000 each. Oh dear. Again, how is he going to do that? Because if you want to put those in, it's not just the cost; it's the cost of the upkeeping them as well. And you're going to see just how little Lee Anderson really even understands that. So his quote was, "We could actually make it a competition between pubs to see who could raise the money the quickest. Let's kick off with this pub, the New Cross." What I'm sorry that it's not really up to the pub. Once that defibrillator goes up, it's very much on the council to run that defibrillator. And at the moment, who has been the ones cutting budgets for things and initiatives like this? Oh, it's the very party Lee Anderson is in. So, um, he once explained the plan to the hospitable Shinto Mathub, the landlord of the New Cross, known to his customers as Matthew. And Parry offered free training, the use of defibrillators. Anderson said that he would encourage the breweries to chip in, saying that £1,000 for a brewery is nothing. No, I really don't think the breweries are going to just chip in and just go, "Here's £1,000 for for a brewery." That doesn't make sense. Plus, when you look at how much pubs are suffering, and you look at especially landlords on the absolute tight margins they're making currently because of the cost of living crisis, it's not very good. So £1,000 for a brewery. I don't think Lee Anderson has maybe even talked to anyone in a brewery or at the moment because they're not having a good time at all because of the cost of living crisis. So he praised the excellent value of the beer in the New Cross, where no pint costs more than £2.90, he remarked. 20 years ago, if a Conservative MP had come into this pub, they'd have got beaten up. Again, okay, you're praising the value of a pint at being £2.90. Again, the amazing, incredible political insight of Lee Anderson. Now, Fair enough. I will complain about, the price of a pint. I'm off to London next week. I know the price of that pint is going to skyrocket, but I know the reason why. It makes business sense that if you're in central London, because of, again, of the rates that you would have to pay and all this, that the price of your average pint is going to skyrocket. So obviously, it's going to be a lot of differences depending where these pubs are. That's why you see so much differences between, a village pub versus one that is in a town or even a city. The price differs dramatically on that. Of course, the next came a very difficult problem. 4 distraught residents came to Anderson to complain that their lives had been made a misery by dogs and fires with choking smoke and throwing feces over the wall of the fence and other antisocial behaviour, as a group of travellers had moved in onto the patch of ground next door. Saying that if we were younger, we would have moved, the man explained, but we brought the bungalow to retire there. The councillors aren't doing a thing about it, a woman said. She had been told on the telephone to stop complaining or she would be in court for harassment. Again, that woman, bear in mind, would have a complaint against the council. And bear in mind, councils do record those phone calls. So she would have a very good complaint against the council. That's why I don't think that, again, this is true. Because, again, the next point comes over. A police officer and a representative of the councils briefly outlined what they could and could not do before Anderson unexpectedly suggested it would be, quote, best to try some mediation first. So that's probably the most sensible point Anderson maybe has made about that. Anderson, of course, is a less than predictable figure than his opponents may understand. At one point, he remarked, as I'm getting older, I'm having vegetarian feelings. We're breeding animals just to eat them. A couple complained about the cruise that they had been on, one of the extraordinary number of things that went wrong, including broken air conditioning system, which rendered their cabinet unbearably cold. The husband said, I want at least half my money back because it was an absolute disaster. It's a vast corporation. They just ignore me. Anderson went, they won't ignore me. Why? No. Why won't they ignore you? Also, bear in mind, there are probably rules and regulations and a whole other things that this couple could do. If Anderson actually seriously wanted to do this, then maybe he should look at maybe hosting stricter rules and regulations for travel companies. If stuff like that goes wrong, maybe they could do that. But of course, Anderson won't do that because the Tory party would shut him down instantly for that. But yeah, Anderson, they won't ignore me. I think they will. Before the surgery, Anderson drove to the West Lancashire College to talk to Mark Hammonds, who runs a small charity called Aid to Gambia, staffed entirely by volunteers, which donates and drives ex-NHS ambulances and other equipment to Gambia. The ambulances are renovated first by the instructors and the trainees at the college, which the charity pays for the spare parts. The vehicles then just have to arrive on what's going on and need a lot of work. Having had the interior stripped out by someone who had hoped to turn it into a camper van. Hammonds then spoke with passion and a difference that the ambulances do make in Gambia, enabling women in danger and dying of childbirth to get to the hospital in time for their lives to be saved. I've got some money, Anderson said. Last week in The Guardian, they produced a horrible cartoon of me. I signed a copy and then auctioned it for £400. That'll teach them. Again, I don't see how that teaches them, but okay. You continue thinking that, Lee. Apart from this donation, he made promises of what he could do to get publicity for the charity, mentioning in the Commons and questions about Hammonds about the best way to provide overseas aid. Oh, how about that overseas aid budget? You know, the one that the Tories massively slashed. That overseas aid budget, which provided the UK with a lot of soft power, would be very interesting to actually see which way Lee Anderson voted in that particular vote. I have a feeling that he would have voted to slash that budget. He's never moved more than 5 miles from where in 1976, 1967, he was born. His father was a miner, and in 1984, unlike most miners in Nottingham, he came out on strike and joined the picket line, where Lee, not yet a miner, joined him. I've seen my dad arrested and thrown in the back of a police van, he said. My father was on strike for nearly a year. The worst part of it was he went back and had to work with men who dodged the picket lines. We loathed Thatcher with a passion, Anderson said, as he recalled the devastating effects of the pit closures on the local communities. Really, they've done nothing since, Lee, and yet you've joined the same party. His heroes in those days were Arthur Scargill, the president of National Miners Union, Des Skinner, the former miner and MP for Bolsover for 49 years, and Tony Benn, all of whom he had heard speak in Chesterfield, and Benn's seat from 1984 to 2001. After 11 or 12 years as a miner himself, Anderson became a single parent and had to pack up my mining career. And he started working for Citizen Advice Bureau, from which, after about 10 years, he was recruited by Gloria de la Pelro, the Labour MP for Ashfield from 2010 to 2017, for whom he ran 2 general election campaigns. He himself, in 2015, became a Labour councillor, but soon afterwards, Momentum mounted a coup and took over the local party and began behaving in a more and more objectionable way. Unfortunately, I have heard this a couple of times. This is unfortunately not. I can't say that obviously what Anderson's about to say is true because it's his word. And to be honest, I don't trust Lee Anderson's word. But unfortunately, momentum parties in certain areas of the UK have had multiple stories of momentum have gone in to local Labour parties and have started acting in some stupid ways, which scared off a lot of people. Again, traditional Labour voters in this way, and in some cases, almost destroyed local CLPs. That is an unfortunate fact. It's annoying because, again, the way that Momentum went about and did this was they did this because, well, Jeremy Corbyn's the leader. We're a socialist party now. You've got to follow this. And unfortunately, it's not, shall we say, the only story floating around out there of how Momentum acted with local Labour at that time. So, in 2018, at a Labour group meeting, one of the Momentum members asked Anderson, "Have you ever read the works of Karl Marx?" "No," Anderson replied, whereupon the Momentum man said, "Why don't you F off and join the Tory party?" "The Labour Party do give good career advice," Anderson remarked with a laugh, for that is what he did. He realized how he had been out campaigning in 2017 with Del Perro and said she'd asked him to talk to an old miner in his 80s to find out how he was going to vote. The aged pitman told Anderson, "In the 1980s, I was thinking we've worked all our lives and we don't own anything. We leave our children with nothing. Then Maggie allowed me to buy my council house. I no longer feel worthless." Well, guess what? There's not a lot of people can do that anymore because there aren't a lot of council houses left for people to be able to take advantage of that. And again, who has been the party for the past couple of years who has not only exacerbated the problem of the housing crisis, it has been ultimately the Conservatives. Anyway, he goes on to talk about the guy told him, "Oh yeah, I'm going to go and join. I'll be voting for the Tory party," and then apparently Anderson went on to join him. And then this is also, I think, really a really bad comment because it's one of these comments that very often annoys me. So when he was working for Citizen Advice, he had also given him food for thought, saying that "I once remember a family in particular with 5 children. The mum and dad had never worked. All 5 children were labelled as having ADHD. Once they're labelled, they can get the DLA, the Disability Living Allowance, which exempts you from the benefits cap. It's very lucrative. This family was getting £53,000 net. You'd need to earn about £73,000 gross to get that kind of income. These kids will be growing up classified as disabled and are going to live a life of being disabled when they're not. The cycle starts again. That's just wrong." I'm sorry, that comment in itself is absolutely wildly wrong. I've said before, benefit caps are absolutely one of the worst nightmares, and unfortunately is one of the things that is putting a lot of people in poverty because they are entitled to a certain amount of money. The government has laid that out, but because of people like Lee Anderson who go, oh, that's too much money, when really it's not, to be honest. You know, if you think if you're thinking they're getting £53,000 net, 5 kids, all with ADHD. Again, we don't know the severity of the ADHD because, again, multiple people out there live with ADHD and it is very much a scale. People can live with ADHD and it never bothers them in their entire lives. They can go to work, do jobs, whatever, never bothers them. And then, of course, it can go down the scale where it can affect them in work. And you just don't know. So this, unfortunately, I think is something very, very wrong that Lee is saying here. And it puts money and fuel into this fire, that the idea that these people on disability living allowance are living high on the hog when they're really not. And unfortunately, it leaves people off who do deserve that disability allowance living off very much the pittance and get hugely crushed by these benefit caps. So it's not really something he should be saying. It's very, very bad that he's saying that, to be honest. Um, and then this is the point where he talks about his parents becoming a Tory. So they were very grumpy at first when I joined the Tory party, he replied, but then they fell in love with Boris. Again, Boris is not a factor at the next general election. And he said episodes such as getting stuck on the zip wire, the rugby tackle by Johnson during a charity football match, made the working class people think, oh, he's making mistakes. He's one of us. He'll happily laugh at himself. When my dad saw the rugby tackle, he could not stop laughing, especially as it were Germany as well. It's so strange that people think that Boris was one of them, because he never really was. His time as prime minister has proven that. And to be honest, this spell, this Johnson magic, has very, very quickly disappeared in these regards. So Johnson is not going to be a factor at the next election at all. Even if by some magical circumstance he's the leader of the party, trust me, people are not going to forget him during the pandemic. Like, the Johnson magic is well and truly over. Just trying to see what others just going on about. I don't think there's anything. Yeah, so essentially, that's the day they spent with the Conservative home. However, I want to really talk about one of these. In fact, we'll have to one day do stuff about the comments that go on in Conservative home, because it just shows you, so not only is the parliamentary party so, pardon me, so fractured, but also how fractured the parliamentary party is. So you've got this guy Derek who comes in, just went on a couple of polling sites. The electoral calculus have Labour with a 62% of winning in Ashfield, with us on 18. Britain predicts has Labour vote in Ashfield on 54.3 and us on 25. We're paying it. Why are we paying attention to this guy? Most of his constituents don't like him. They don't like us. So that's very clear. And bear in mind the split on who and who doesn't like him. In fact, where is it? This is a good example of something I would want to bring up. About the comment with children with ADHD. This is the problem with the shoot from the hip politicians. They say things that significantly influence the public's perception of a particular issue. Take the above quote. There are lots of people with ADHD who aren't on benefits, and there are lots of people who function perfectly fine with it. There are loads of people with ADHD doing very well in jobs and education, but not in 30p Lee's head. No, they're all those scroungers. That he cares for his wife should make him more understanding, but no, not 30p Lee. You see, every time people like him say like this, it just adds to the grist of the DWP mill. Before you know it, genuine sufferers have had their pittance reduced even further. Genuine sufferers of disabilities are left high and dry. It's simply not good enough. Again, Exactly right. That is it. Those types of comments that he makes do add to the public perception of this. I've said before, things like Benefit Street added to years and years of poverty porn, which allowed the government to just slash away benefits that people had access to. And what's happened as they slashed away at these benefits, people have ended up more and more in poverty because of this. Um, where's the other one? Oh yeah, this is quite funny. So again, this is continuing from a fight, but it is quite funny that is going from this. So, or it might just be might that the party has virtually been split with those with critical thinking skills and those without. I do not think that anyone with a functioning brain can look at the past 12 years and think that we've done well. Factor in the massive move rightwards within the party, and you'll find a lot of dissatisfaction from the One Nationers. But yeah, it's all Labour. Again, they're having a fight that, again, people from like Labour are coming over to talk about this. And then this is an interesting one. So he's quite an embarrassment and an idiot. Forget the fact that most of his days seem to be spent in pubs, and the fact that he thinks defibrillators outside every pub is a good idea to show the depth of his thinking, given the rate that they are closing. Take him excusing swearing as you're in Ashfield when anyone who ever calls him out without swearing is blocked on his social media, uh, creating an echo chamber. And of course, not one mention as why he's been in the news so much recently. Again, of his close friends is just a puff piece. Again, this is really just a puff piece to try and, I think, pump up Lee Anderson to sort of fight against um, the sort of that bad press that came out about him, shall we say, with his particular interesting friends that he's been pictured with recently. But yeah, moreover, this is a massive puff piece to try and again amp up Lee Anderson. Um, as you can see, there is a massive fight in that comment section between people who support Anderson and people who don't. And most of the people who support Anderson are claiming that they live in his constituency and that he's all right. Well, everyone else seems to be saying, well, no, look at the polls, look at this. No, he's an idiot. Why are we supporting this guy? Um, and I will reiterate, why did Lee Anderson become deputy chairman? He has been put there for one express reason alone, and that is in the hope and the sheer desperation that Lee Anderson can somehow be able to win at least uh, the May local elections, and hopefully in the north, maybe those won't be as bad, and to get Tory voters out voting. Because as we've said before, you look at all the recent by-elections, even the last local May election that we had as well under Boris. Those did not go well and were showing that large portions of the Conservative voters were not turning out. That is incredibly rare. And as we've said before, we'll be putting huge alarm bells in uh, at the Conservative Party HQ. So who do we need? We need someone who is popular, who can get people out to vote. Oh my God, we might have found another Boris. They hope, they climb, but no, Lee Anderson is not another Boris. He, he has very, very clearly split the party. You can even see from the different polling stations, he is not popular in his constituency. His constituents don't overly well like him. And of course, he isn't really putting forward anything, shall we say, mind-bendingly shocking that would actually benefit his constituents. In fact, again, a couple of those things that people are facing are probably the result of, well, conservative policy. So hey, that was a day with with Lee Anderson. Very much a puff piece written by Conservative Home to try and sort of see off the negative things that have been, shall we say, released. Mainly, of course, his close friends who happen to have some interesting tattoos, to say the least, and were caught doing some very dubious salutes. But hey, there you go. So, as always, guys, thank you very much for watching, and of course, we'll see you all next time.